The first thing I heard was not the engine. It was the snow breaking apart like somebody had ripped a sheet of plywood in half across the whole mountain. And by the time I got my boots under me, the blade had already gone through the wall. I was yelling, waving both arms, sliding around like a fool on that icy driveway, but the operator never even looked at me. He just kept watching the woman standing above him in the white parka, the one giving calm little hand signals, like she was guiding a valet into a parking spot instead of tearing down the only thing standing between my house and a loaded Avalanche slope. My wife Mara was at the kitchen window with both hands flat on the glass, her oxygen mine tugging at her shoulder, and I remember thinking, in that stupid clear way your brain gets when fear gets too big, well, this is how rich people kill you. They do it politely, with paperwork and somebody else driving the machine. The woman in the white parka was Celeste Rourke, president of the Black Pine Ridge Homeowners Council, although if you asked half the people up there, they would have called her queen before they called her president. She had that soft ski resort voice, the kind people use when they're about to ruin your life, but want to sound disappointed in you for making them do it. She had moved into the Upper Ridge maybe 6 years earlier, bought the big cedar and glass place with a heated stone driveway, then slowly collected every committee seat, every emergency contact list, every maintenance contract, every little lever people did not notice until someone like Celeste starts pulling them. My name is Jonah Reed, and I am not some survivalist nut. I am not the guy yelling about government helicopters or burying canned beans under the shed. I used to pour concrete. Then I did county road work. Then my back got bad and I settled into being the guy neighbors called when a culvert froze or a retaining wall started leaning. That snow wall took me 2 winters to build. Not because I was bored, not because I wanted my yard to look like a medieval fort, but because our house sat beneath the old granite spur slide path, and that path had a memory. It had already taken a hunting cabin in 1998, peeled the garage off its foundation in 2011, and every older person on that road knew you did not mess with the way snow naturally spread out across that slope. My wall was not meant to stop a mountain. Nobody stops a mountain. It was meant to slow it down, break its shoulder, make it lose some anger before it got near the house. Mara used to joke that I built it like I was apologizing to the mountain in advance. And maybe I was. She had pulmonary fibrosis, which sounds clinical until you see someone you love stop halfway between the couch and the sink because breathing has become a negotiation. Cold air made it worse. Panic made it worse. Stairs made it worse. And an evacuation in a storm was not something we could just wing with a flashlight and a positive attitude. We planned everything. Extra tanks, battery backups, a sled in the mudroom, wool blankets by the door, and that wall above the driveway, packed with stone, timber, and snow fencing, tied into the natural shoulder of the ridge. It was ugly, sure. I never claimed it was pretty, but it worked. Then Celeste decided it was a violation. It started small, like these things always do. One email with a lot of friendly language had not much friendliness in it, saying the wall created a visual obstruction inconsistent with Black Pine architectural standards. I ignored that one because it was December, and I was not going to risk my wife's lungs over somebody's view. Then came the second email, then a certified letter, then a notice taped to the mailbox, then 2 board members showing up in matching quilted jackets, telling me the Upper Ridge had concerns about snow migration. Snow migration. That was the phrase. Like the snow had packed a little suitcase and was looking for an apartment. I'd told them the wall followed the original county mitigation notes, and one of them, a retired dentist named Lowell who always smelled like peppermint and bourbon, smiled at me and said, "Jonah, we're trying to keep this neighborly." When people say that, they almost never mean neighborly. They mean quiet. Celeste's problem with me had roots, though, and I knew it. 3 years earlier, I had spoken up at a budget meeting after I found out the council wanted to reroute plow priority away from the lower homes so the Upper Ridge driveways would get cleared first for a holiday rental weekend. I did not shout. I just asked why the people with the steepest escape road were being put last. And the room did that thing rooms do when truth walks in wearing dirty boots. Celeste gave me a smile so clean it practically squeaked and said, "Jonah, some of us have to think beyond our own front porch." After that, permits got slower. Complaints got faster, and every time Mara ended up in the hospital, a violation notice seemed to arrive within 48 hours, like the council had a sympathy calendar and used it backwards. So when the snowcat came that morning, I should have been surprised, but I was not. Not really. I was angry and scared and still somehow embarrassed, because when people with polished boots trespass on your land and act official enough, there is this awful second where you wonder if maybe you are the crazy one. Celeste stood there while the machine chewed through the wall, her expensive gloves tucked under one arm, phone in her other hand, recording everything like she was gathering evidence against me instead of creating it. I ran toward her and said, "Celeste, my wife cannot get out fast if that slope lets go." She tilted her head with this tiny little pity smile and said, "Jonah, your personal situation does not override community safety." I said, "Community safety is exactly what that wall is for." She looked past me toward the ridge, toward the houses with cathedral windows and private saunas and outdoor fireballs, nobody used because actual winter is less charming than the brochure. And she said, "The upper properties are exposed because of your obstruction. One structure cannot endanger the entire community." "One structure," I said. "You mean my home?" She did not answer. That was the moment I understood how she had done it in her own head. She had turned Mara and me into a number, a lower lot, a stubborn owner, an inconvenience sitting in the wrong place on her map. Behind us, Mara knocked on the kitchen window. Not hard, just once, because hard was beyond her, and the operator finally glanced over. For half a second, he looked ashamed. Then Celeste lifted 2 fingers, and he dropped the blade again. The rest of the wall split open with a sound I felt in my teeth. Snow burst across the driveway. Timbers snapped. One of the stone baskets rolled like a toy, and all the careful work of 2 winters became debris under a grey sky. I stepped in front of the machine because sometimes your body makes decisions before your brain checks with the lawyer. And one of Celeste's maintenance guys, a broad kid named Travis who had fixed our gate once and eaten Mara's banana bread at our kitchen table, moved between me and the blade. He would not look me in the eye. He just said, "Don't make this worse, Jonah." And I laughed. Not because anything was funny, but because sometimes that is the only sound left when the world gets too stupid to believe. "Make it worse," I said. "Travis." She just opened an Avalanche path over my wife's bedroom. Celeste walked up then, close enough that I could smell her perfume under the diesel. Something floral and expensive and completely insane in that storm air. She handed me a red notice in a plastic sleeve. "Emergency authority," she said. "Your wall has been removed as an immediate hazard. Any attempt to rebuild or interfere with mitigation equipment will result in fines, suspension of road access, and a lien against your property." She said it like she was reading the weather. I looked at the notice, then at my house, then at Mara behind the glass, and for one short second I wanted to tear that paper in half and throw it in her face. But Mara shook her head. Barely, just enough for me to see it. So I did not. I folded the notice, put it inside my coat, and watched Celeste smile because she thought that meant she had won. What she did not know was that my wife had just saved me from giving her the one thing she needed, an excuse to make me the villain. And what I did not know, not yet, was that the wall was only the first thing Celeste planned to bury. The emergency meeting hit my inbox before Celeste's crew had even cleared the bottom of my road, and I remember standing in the mudroom with snow melting off my jeans, reading the subject line 3 times because it was so calm it almost stopped violent. Mandatory community safety review. 2 p.m. attendance required. Mara was on the couch by then, wrapped in the blue blanket her sister made her, pretending to watch some cooking show with the volume too low, which was her way of telling me she did not want to talk about how scared she was. I put another log in the stove, checked the backup batteries, then sat at the kitchen table with my laptop while the destroyed wall sat outside the window like a missing tooth. When the meeting opened, Celeste was already centered on the screen, hair perfect, fireplace glowing behind her, the whole thing staged like a luxury real estate interview. She thanked everyone for their patience during a dynamic weather event, which was a funny way to say she had sent a bulldozer into my yard. Then she explained that the council had taken decisive steps to correct an illegal snow obstruction threatening the ridge. I unmuted myself and said, "Celeste, you just removed a mitigation barrier during an active storm cycle." She muted me before I finished the sentence. "Jonah," she said, still smiling, "this is not the time for personal grievances." Personal grievances. That was what she called my wife, maybe dying under a wall of snow. Lowell the dentist nodded along like a bobblehead in a ski lodge gift shop, and another board member named Denise, who owned 3 rental cabins and once asked Mara if oxygen tanks counted as unsightly exterior equipment, said the council had to think about liability. Nobody said the quiet part, but everybody knew it. The lower homes could be sacrificed more cheaply than the upper ones. I looked at the little squares on the screen. Neighbors I had dug out after storms. People I had helped jumped dead batteries. People who had sat in my kitchen eating chili after the power went out, and they looked anywhere but at me. Then Celeste read the resolution. My wall was deemed non-compliant. Any rebuilding would bring daily fines. Interference with authorized equipment would trigger road access restrictions. Continued non-compliance would result in a lien. She said lien, like she enjoyed the taste of it. Mara coughed behind me, a dry, small sound that cut through the laptop speakers somehow. And for 1 second, Celeste's eyes flicked past me. She had heard it. She knew. Then she looked down at her notes and kept going. That was when something inside me went still. Not peaceful, not calm exactly, just still. Anger wanted me to get loud, to call her what she was, to make the meeting explode so at least everyone would have to admit there was fire in the room. But Mara reached over the back of the couch and put 2 fingers on my shoulder, and that tiny touch pulled me back. So I shut my mouth, opened the recording app on my phone, and let Celeste finish hanging herself with complete sentences. After the meeting ended, the emails came in like little snowflakes from hell. Notice of violation, emergency access warning, updated plow priority, architectural enforcement, each one dressed up in official language and each one telling me the same thing. Sit down, shut up, and let the people above you decide what your life is worth. I did not sleep that night. Around midnight, when Mara finally drifted off, I went into the garage and pulled out the old county binders from when I worked road maintenance. Most people throw things away when they leave a job. I kept maps. My father used to say, paper is the only witness that does not get nervous. And the older I get, the more I think that man understood human beings better than any therapist. Spread everything across the workbench. The original granite spur Avalanche overlay, drainage charts, slope grade notes, old survey sheets with coffee stains and mouse bites along the corners. Then I opened the map Celeste had attached to the council notice. At first, it looked professional. Clean lines, neat labels, the kind of thing that impresses people who do not know what they are looking at. But the more I stared, the more it bothered me. The natural slide path was too straight. Mountains do not draw straight lines just because your HOA likes clean diagrams. Snow spreads when it can. It wanders around shoulders, loses force over ribs of rock, gets broken up by trees and ridges and rough ground. Celeste's map turned a wide, messy, but survivable path into a narrow chute, and that chute ran right through my wall. I overlaid the old county file with the council version, adjusted the transparency, and watched the lie line up on my screen. The original path fanned out above our property, losing speed before it reached the lower road. My wall sat at the edge of that fan, exactly where it could take some of the punch and bleed it sideways. Celeste's revision cut that fan down into a funnel, and once the wall was gone, the snow would not just move past us, it would accelerate. I followed the path upward and then down again, trying to understand why anyone would be dumb enough to do this during a storm, until I noticed a little grey rectangle under Celeste's property marked Private Reinforced Subgrade Room. I actually laughed when I saw it, just one ugly laugh in the garage. Because of course, Celeste had a cold storage vault under that house. Everybody knew about it because she wanted everybody to know. She called it her collection room. Like saying wine cellar would have been too ordinary for a woman who needed even her grapes to sound elected. At fundraisers, she would drop details into conversation. French limestone, climate system, private tasting tunnel, bottles older than the town charter. People joked that if Black Pine ever had a disaster, Celeste would save the Burgundy before the children. Turns out the joke had not gone far enough. The natural snow path threatened the slope below her house. My wall helped keep that path honest. But if she could call my wall an obstruction and force a new chute across my land, she could spare her underground shrine and push the danger onto the lower lots. I sat there with my hands on the workbench, listening to the wind press against the garage door, and I felt the kind of fear that comes after anger, the colder kind, because this was not stupidity. It was math with a motive. I made copies of everything. Screenshots, overlays, timestamps, the meeting recording, the violation notices, old county maps, the video from our porch camera showing the snowcat going through the wall and Celeste pointing like a conductor. Then I called the only person I still knew at the county office, a field engineer named Ruth Calder. Ruth was built like a fence post and had the personality of a locked toolbox. which is to say she was exactly the person you want when everybody else is performing concern. She answered on the fourth ring and said, "Jonah, either someone is dead or you forgot how late it is." I said, "Not dead yet." She went quiet. I sent her the files. 10 minutes later, she called back, and the first thing she said was not hello. It was, "Who authorized this cut?" I said, "Black Pine Council." She said a word I probably should not repeat on YouTube unless you want the video demonetized before breakfast. By dawn, Ruth was in my driveway in a county truck with chains on all 4 tires, snow probe in one hand, tablet under her arm, face red from the wind. She did not waste time with small talk. She walked to the scar where my wall had been, looked up the slope, looked down at my house, then drove the probe into the snowpack. Once, twice, 3 times. Each time, her mouth got flatter. She pulled up a county plan on her tablet, laid Celeste's revised map over it, and said, "Your wall was not diverting snow into the ridge. It was slowing the lower fan." I said, "I know." She looked at me, and for the first time that morning her hard face softened just a little. "No, John," she said. "I mean officially, I know." That one sentence almost took my knees out. Funny how much a person can carry until one other person says, "You are not crazy." Ruth radioed for an emergency halt order and requested county enforcement to restore temporary barriers before the next load cycle. The response crackled back through static. Jurisdiction dispute. Review pending. Council emergency authority under assessment. Ruth closed her eyes for half a second like she was counting to 10 in a language that had no nice words in it. "Paperwork," she muttered. "Always wearing boots, too clean for the weather." Before she left, she looked toward Mara in the window and said, "If that upper slab releases with this chute open, you do not wait for permission to move her. You go." I said, "Move her where?" Ruth looked up at the white ridge disappearing into the storm and did not answer fast enough. That was my answer. By late afternoon, Celeste announced another mandatory meeting, this one in person at the Summit Half Lodge, because apparently nothing says safety like dragging sick people and scared neighbors into a building halfway up the mountain during an avalanche warning. Mara insisted on coming. I told her no. Then she gave me the look. Married people know. The one that says the discussion has ended and only the less intelligent spouse has not realized it yet. So I packed her oxygen, blankets, medications, the emergency sled, and drove us up through blowing snow while the road vanished and reappeared in the headlights like it was changing its mind. The lodge parking lot was packed. Inside, people shook snow off coats, whispered in corners, checked phones, tried to act annoyed instead of terrified. Celeste stood near the stone fireplace in a cream sweater that probably cost more than my first truck, greeting people with that same soft voice, like she was hosting a wine tasting and not a possible manslaughter preview. Ruth stood near the back with 2 deputies and a rolled set of maps under her arm. When Celeste saw her, the smile tightened. Good, I thought. Let the Queen see the locksmith. Celeste opened by saying the council had acted responsibly under pressure, and that misinformation from certain residents was creating unnecessary panic. Certain residents. I raised my hand. She ignored it, so I stood anyway. The room turned. Mara's hand found mine, thin and warm, and I felt her shaking. I did not shout. I did not accuse. I said, "Celeste, did you know removing my wall would narrow the natural snow fan into a chute over my house?" Her smile stayed in place, but her eyes went sharp. "Jonah," she said, "this is not a courtroom." I said, "No, but there are deputies here, so let's not waste the upgrade." A few people made that nervous little laugh people make when they are scared and grateful. Someone else said the thing. Celeste's face colored. I asked again, "Did you know?" She said, "We relied on expert guidance." Ruth stepped forward then, unrolling the map across the lodge table. "No," she said, "you did not rely on county guidance, because the county plan says the opposite." The room went so quiet I could hear the ice ticking against the windows. Ruth pointed to the old path, then the revised one, then the red line running through my broken wall. "This cut increases velocity, concentrates load, and places lower residents at unnecessary risk," Celeste said. "That is your interpretation." Ruth looked at her and said, "It is physics, Mrs. Rourke, not a book club opinion." And right then, before Celeste could answer, the mountain made a sound so deep the glasses behind the bar trembled against each other. Not a crash, not thunder, just one low, hollow whomp rolling through the lodge floor. and every phone in that room lit up at once. Every phone in that lodge lit up at once. Not one ringtone, not one little buzz, but a whole roomful of warnings vibrating in pockets and purses and on tabletops like the mountain. I'd found a way to call each of us personally, and for one long second, nobody moved. The alert said avalanche danger extreme, immediate shelter or evacuation recommended where safe, which was a fancy way of saying the slope was deciding things faster than people with titles could argue about them. Ruth called a turn toward the windows, and I saw her face change before she said anything. That scared me more than the alert. Ruth was not dramatic. Ruth could look at a washed-out road, a fallen power pole, or a drunk man yelling beside a ditch and still seem mildly inconvenienced. But right then her jaw tightened, and she said, "Everybody away from the glass." Celeste tried to recover her room, because that is what people like her do, even when the room is no longer theirs. She lifted both hands and said, "Please remain calm. The ridge has been stabilized. There is no need for panic." The second whomp came before she finished. It rolled under the floorboards, deep and soft and final, like a giant hand pressing down on the roof of the world. The lights flickered. Someone screamed. Chairs scraped. Mara squeezed my hand so hard I felt her wedding ring cut into my finger, and I pulled her against me, half shielding her with my body, which was useless and human, and all I had. Ruth shouted for people to move toward the interior hall, but half the lodge ran to the windows anyway, because human beings are idiots when disaster looks cinematic. I looked too. I wish I could say I was smarter than that, but I looked, and what I saw still visits me when the wind hits our house the wrong way. The upper slab had cracked across granite spur, a black line slicing through the white. Then the whole face began to move, not tumbling wildly, not spreading like the old county map said it should, but tightening, gathering itself, pouring into that narrow channel Celeste's crew had carved through my land. It was beautiful in the worst possible way, a clean white violence, fast and focused, carrying trees and stone and broken ice like they weighed nothing. It came down past the line where my wall had been, and for one sick breath I thought, this is it. This is where Mara and I end. Not with some grand speech, not with justice, just two lower lot names in a county report. But the snow hit the open chute too hard, too fast, and instead of spreading into our place, it shot past us, blasting over the lower road with a pressure wave that slapped the lodge windows and made my ears pop. Then it climbed the forced angle of the retaining cut the council had installed below the upper ridge. Ruth whispered, "Oh no," but it did not sound like surprise. It sounded like math arriving on time. Celeste saw it too. Her mouth opened, and for once no perfect sentence came out. On the big screen above the fireplace, somebody from lodge maintenance had pulled up the exterior security feed. Maybe out of instinct, maybe because everybody needed proof that what they were seeing was real. The camera showed Celeste's property from below, that big cedar palace blowing warm against the storm. The kind of house magazines call mountain modern because rich people never want to admit they live in a box with better windows. Snow slammed into the slope beneath it and piled against the reinforced doors of her underground collection room. For a second the doors held. I remember thinking, of course they hold. Of course even her basement has better protection than my whole house. Then the concrete cracked. Not a little crack either, but a jagged, dark mouth opening across the retaining face. The doors folded inward. The hillside dropped. Snow poured down into that hidden room with nowhere to go, compressing and grinding and multiplying its own force until the whole structure seemed to exhale red. Wine bottles burst by the hundreds, maybe thousands, racks snapping, glass flashing like ice, dark red wine flooding out through white snow in thick rivers. Nobody cheered. That surprised me. In a cheaper story, people would have laughed and clapped while Celeste lost her precious cellar. But real life does not feel that neat when you are standing close to ruin. The room just watched, silent, while the thing she tried to save by risking us disappeared under the weight of her own decision. Celeste lunged toward the control table and shouted, "Turn it off. Turn it off right now." The maintenance tech, a young guy named Ben who I had seen salting the front steps, did not move. His face was pale, but his voice came out clear. "We warned you," he said. "We told the board the chute would overload the slab." Celeste spun on him so fast her cream sweater blurred. "You were instructed to follow the approved plan." Ruth stepped between them and said, "Approved by whom?" Celeste looked at Lowell, at Denise, at the deputies, at the neighbors who had gone quiet on my video call hours earlier, and one by one they all looked away. There is a special kind of loneliness that finds powerful people when fear stops working. A sheriff's deputy asked Ruth if she could show the maps again, so she did, right there on the lodge table. County plan, council revision, video from my porch camera, Celeste pointing while the snowcat tore through my wall, the red line of the new chute running like a confession across the screen. Ruth did not embellish it. She did not need to. She said, this was not mitigation. This was redirection. It increased fatality exposure to the lower residents and concentrated load toward a private subgrade structure. Celeste said, that is defamatory. Ruth looked at the Avalanche feed still glowing behind her and said, no, Mrs. Rourke, that is documented. A deputy took Celeste aside, not roughly, not with the big dramatic handcuffs people want in movie endings, just firm enough to make it clear the crown had come off. The county suspended the council's emergency authority that night. By morning, Black Pine Ridge was under outside oversight. The lower road was reopened for medical access. Temporary barriers went up along the natural fan, and every notice against my property was frozen pending investigation. Mara and I did not go home till almost dawn. She slept in the truck on the way down, one hand around her oxygen line, her face turned toward the window where the storm had softened into a pale blue morning. I kept thinking I should feel victorious, but I mostly felt tired in my bones, tired of having to prove that our lives counted. A week later, Ruth stood in our driveway with a new county-stamped plan and told me the wall could be rebuilt, properly this time, with engineering support and no council interference. I asked her where she wanted the temporary line. She handed me the marker and said, you know this slope better than most of them ever cared to. So I walked out into the snow and marked the old fan, the messy one, the honest one, the path the mountain had taken before Celeste tried to make it serve her. People came by after that, bringing casseroles, apologies, awkward little speeches that started with, we should have said something. I accepted most of them because bitterness is heavy and I had already carried enough. Celeste resigned before the charges were announced, which is a polite word for being pushed out while lawyers measure the fall. Some folks said she got what she deserved. Some said nobody deserved to lose that much property. Me, I do not know. I know Mara is alive. I know my house is still standing. I know the mountain did not care about money, status, board titles, or wine old enough to have a passport. It only followed weight, pressure, gravity, truth, and maybe that is the part people argue about, whether what happened was justice or just nature correcting a lie too big to hold. So tell me what you think. If your HOA, your board, your neighbors, the people with clean boots and legal language, decided your home was acceptable collateral, would you stay calm and build a paper trail, or would you fight them right there in the snow? Was Celeste punished by the mountain, by the law, or by her own arrogance? Drop your take in the comments, because I promise you, in communities like ours, silence is never neutral. It is just the side people take before they admit they chose it.